Good morning, everyone. How is everyone doing? We are about to kick off soon. I'll give it just maybe about 20 seconds or so before we get things going. I can see the numbers ticking up slowly. We've got a jam-packed webinar today. Simon's been, running through the list of all the slides and everything, trying to condense as much as we can because there seems to be a lot of changes that have happened and a lot more to come as well. So we'll work through those today. I'm just waiting for the numbers to tick up and they are going up. So Simon, shall we kick things off? Do you reckon?
Let's do it. Let's
All
go.
right. Yay. Okay, so welcome everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us for our employment law updates webinar. We are looking at 2025, what's happened so far and a bit beyond. I am joined by an amazing lawyer. I always say this. He is literally the person that you go to for UK and Australian advice as well. So I am so excited to be here, joined by Simon OB. Thank you so much, Simon. You are head of HR advisory, and as well as that, also principal lawyer at EI Legal. So tell me what's been happening. Give me a bit of background about you, and we'll kick things off from there.
Okay. Very, very brief background. I've been an employment lawyer for about 20 years. First 10 of those was in England and then moved out here about, I say 10 years ago, it'll be 12 years ago. So maybe I've been an employment lawyer for 22 years. But yeah, I've been with Employment Hero and its group of companies for about 8 years. And yeah, love, helping people with employment law and compliance and all that good stuff.
Oh, that's fantastic. And like I said, experience that Simon has is amazing. It's such a breadth and wealth of experience. And you may be wondering who's speaking to you. My name is Sanam. I am the employment counsel here at Employment Hero. That's just a fancy word for an employment lawyer. And I work in-house to help with compliance and things like that. So we will kick things off by looking at a little bit of housekeeping, as we generally do. This is a disclaimer just to say that please remember that this information that's provided to you is in good faith. And things are subject to change. There's new laws coming out later on in the year, so just keep an eye out. We always have our finger on the pulse to help everyone out that's out there. So definitely keep up with the updates. And aside from that, in terms of housekeeping, we also want to make sure that you're not scrambling and scribbling everything down. Remember that this is a recorded session. You also have your Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screens. Please use that because we are trying to get through as many of the questions as we can. It is a jam-packed one. This is probably the longest one I've seen that we've tried to do in an hour, but I believe it. Simon's been prepping, and this is just normal for him. This is just stuff that he talks about day in and day out. So I'm sure we'll breeze through it. So everyone, buckle up. We're going to get things started. We'll kick off by kind of looking at where the employment law changes have happened already for 2025, all the way through to kind of what's ahead now that we're reaching almost the halfway mark, what's ahead for 2025, and then looking at 2026 and beyond. So we'll kick things off, Simon, by going and looking at what changes have we seen so far. Now, I say we're reaching June. I have a feeling that a lot has happened in that much time. So let me know what's been going on, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Sanam. So there's a lot to talk about today, but what you might have noticed from the agenda is a lot of stuff that is changing or has changed is about modern awards. So we thought we would just take a moment to talk about modern awards generally because it's so important for compliance. And apologies if this is telling you something that you already know, but modern awards are a set of rules and regulations that sit over and above the Fair Work Act, and they apply on a industry or occupation level. So you have, for example, the Restaurant Industry Award that will apply to anyone working in a restaurant, regardless of their role, or you have an occupation award like the Clerk's Award, which applies to people doing admin work, kind of regardless of the industry. And then you have the Miscellaneous Award, which kind of mops up everyone who would otherwise not be award covered. And the important thing about modern awards is they set minimum rates of pay for people covered by the award, but they have other obligations in there as well. And the thing to realize is the majority of employees in Australia are covered by a modern award, the majority of employees in Australia. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, we don't need to worry about modern awards, they don't apply in our business. I would just caution you, just to reflect on that, maybe get some advice, maybe make sure that that is indeed the case, because they do have a very wide reach. Yes, it is true that awards don't apply to everyone. They generally don't apply to very senior employees, but that's only a general rule. The Shads Award, for example, covers employees in certain circumstances right up to the CEO level. And you have awards like the Banking and Finance Award that cover professional employees such as accountants, HR managers who would ordinarily not be covered by an award. So just make sure you understand your obligations there, because if you don't know which award applies, then it's very difficult for you to be compliant. You can't be sure that you're paying your employees everything they're entitled to. And of course, there's obligations in awards that aren't to do with pay, break times, breaks between shifts, all of that kind of stuff. So just a plug for modern awards and making sure you understand them. So thank you for listening to my TED Talk on that. But let's jump into what has changed. And that leads us neatly into wage theft, because this is all about compliance too. So on the 1st of January, the law changed to introduce wage theft as a criminal offence at federal level. So wage theft, in a nutshell, is about deliberate, intentional underpayments, and the maximum penalty for that is 10 years in prison. Individuals can be subject to huge fines, as can companies. But it's all about, deliberate underpayments, not honest mistakes. So the legislation that brought in the wage theft offence, it has a couple of interesting features, I suppose. It says that for small businesses, those with less than 15 employees, they can't be prosecuted for wage theft if they comply with the Voluntary Small Business Wage Compliance Code, which is a document published by the Fair Work Ombudsman. And that has a list of factors that the Fair Work Ombudsman would consider when they were working out has there been wage theft by a small business. Talks about things like, did the business check whether an award applied to the employee? Did they seek advice from a reputable source? If they discovered an underpayment, did they deal with it quickly? So it's well worth your time looking at that code if you're a small business. But the factors in there are also really helpful for larger businesses too. We'll send out a link to that and a blog about that with the communications after the webinar. The other thing in the wage theft legislation is it says a business of any size won't be prosecuted for wage theft if they enter into a cooperation agreement with the Fair Work Ombudsman. And what that is the Fair Work Ombudsman has a discretion to enter into agreements with employers where there's been an underpayment, where they'll say, we won't prosecute you for wage theft if you agree to put things right, if you put steps in place to make sure that an underpayment doesn't occur in the future. So you might have to commit to doing regular audits or to get professional advice from somewhere, that sort of thing. They generally won't agree to enter into that sort of agreement unless a business has self-reported and come forward with revealing to them that they've discovered an underpayment. So if you are in an underpayment situation, do get some advice about reporting that to the FWO. I think the main take-home message, I would say, regarding wage theft is there's only going to be a minuscule number of businesses who go out to set out to deliberately underpay their employees. The real risk for most employers is this: you might have an underpayment which is a result of an honest mistake. You might have wrongly classified someone, not realized the modern award applied, or just put the figures in wrong into your payroll engine, whatever. if it's not intentional, it's not wage theft. But the real risk, I think, lies where you discover an underpayment that has been going on, but you don't take steps to make sure that that underpayment doesn't continue. So if you discover it in the first pay period, but you let it continue in pay period 2, pay period 3, and that goes on for weeks or months, I think there's a really strong argument that once you know it, that the underpayment is occurring and you let it continue, that would be classed as a deliberate action. So I think that is a real risk for employers. And just worth remembering too, wage theft is about intentional underpayments, but even unintentional underpayments can still be subject to huge fines. You've got the figures on the screen. So compliance is really something that every business needs to focus on. Okay, so that was brought in the 1st of January. Another big change which came into effect on the 1st of January was concerning introductory levels in modern awards. And 37 awards were changed on the 1st of Jan, and a couple being changed on the 1st of April. We'll send out a link to a blog on this with the comms after the webinar, so you can see which awards are affected. But there are some very common awards in there: manufacturing, children's services, graphic arts, etc. And what the changes did is they changed the rules about how long someone could be employed in the lowest classification in the award, and or change the pay rates for those classifications. So the changes vary from award to award, but they typically say something like, where someone is employed at the lowest classification level, they can only be employed at that level for 6 months, and after that they automatically need to be bumped up to the the next highest classification, and of course the higher pay rate. So make sure you understand those obligations, because that is new for a lot of awards. We'll send out the full details after the webinar. Okay, moving on. There have been some major decisions regarding the aged care sector over the last couple of years by the Fair Work Commission, which are now sort of coming into effect. The Fair Work Commission decided that work in the aged care sector was undervalued. In other words, the minimum rates of pay set by awards in those sectors, it determined was too low when compared to other wages for work of similar skill levels in other sectors. And that was in part due to, in recent times, the work of aged care workers getting more complex, more involved. So they determined that workers in that sector should have their wages increased. Alongside that, they determined that the classification structure in aged care sector awards needed to be changed. So there's been a raft of decisions that affect both employees who work in aged care facilities, who would be under the aged care award, employees who work in the private homes of elderly people, providing home care to them, who would be covered by the SHADS award, and nurses working in the aged care sector, who would be covered by the nurses award. So changes to classifications and pay increases, which come into effect at various dates from the 1st of January and throughout the next couple of years. Again, we have some detailed information on exactly how those changes work that we will share after the webinar. Okay, casual conversion is the next thing on the agenda. So the law regarding casual conversion changed in 2024. And what we mean by casual conversion is, of course, the rights of a casual employee to convert to permanent employment. So those new rules were introduced on the 26th of August 2024, but for non-small business employers, those with 15 or more employees, the new rules didn't come into effect for 6 months. And the new rules operate so that once a employee has 6 months employment in a non-small business, they can elect to convert to permanent employment if they no longer meet the statutory definition of casual employee. So, for example, they might have been hired initially only working irregular hours. Sometimes they accepted shifts, sometimes they declined them. But if over time they've kind of morphed into a position where they're working regular hours, they're always required to accept a shift offered to them. It's likely to be the case they no longer meet the definition of casual employee. Once they've had 6 months employment, they can elect to convert to permanent employment. Now, the first date that an employee could do that under the new rules, because of that 6 month window where the old rules continue to apply, was the 26th of February. So if you are a business with 15 or more employees, you are now under the new regime. Make sure you understand your obligations regarding casual conversion. We've got a really detailed guide that we will send to you. For small businesses, those with less than 15 employees, casual employees get the right to elect to convert after 12 months of employment. The old rules continue to apply for 12 months after the 26th of August. So the new regime kicks in on the 26th of August 2025. That will be the first date that employees can request conversion under the new regime. Also remember, just while we're on the subject of casual employees, you have to provide casual employees with a casual employment information statement when they start employment, but you have to give it to them at certain intervals throughout their employment as well. The exact time to provide that depends on whether you're a small business or not. Again, that is all covered in the comms that we will send out post-webinar. Employment Hero has a great function where it will alert you on the anniversary dates of casual employees to tell you to send out the information statement again. All right, and then lastly, for what we've seen in 2025 so far, is sexual harassment prevention plans in Queensland. So this was introduced on the 1st of March for businesses that have employees in Queensland. There is now a requirement to have a written sexual harassment prevention plan in place. Now, that is different from a sexual harassment policy, which of course all employers should have in place as well. A sexual harassment policy is generally something which explains what sexual harassment is, the fact that it's not tolerated in your workplace, and how employees can raise complaints, etc. A sexual harassment prevention plan is a written document which should set out the assessment that the employer has made of particular risks of sexual harassment occurring in their workplace, and the steps that the employer is taking to mitigate those risks. So it's a risk assessment document. The example on the Queensland regulator website talks about a retail store where they've identified there's a risk of sexual harassment from customers occurring when employees are working on their own. Therefore, the controls they put in place include trying to roster wherever possible 2 employees to work together, making sure their CCTV works, having a poster campaign telling customers in the shop that they don't tolerate abuse of the staff, training employees up on how to deal with instances of harassment, etc. So you need, if you're in Queensland, you need to have a document in place showing your risk assessment, showing the steps you're putting in place to control those risks. You need to have consulted with your staff on that. You need to give them access to the final version, and you need to update it every 3 years or after an incident. There are very similar laws in Victoria, but in all jurisdictions, it is highly recommended to follow a similar process. All employers have a positive duty now to prevent sexual harassment insofar as it's reasonable before it occurs. There is also obligations under work health and safety law to ensure that employees have a safe place of work. To comply with all of those things, it's best in practice to have this risk assessment approach to sexual harassment. Again, we've got some information, a blog about these new obligations, which we will share. So that's a quick summary of what we have talked about. And then Sanam, I think I'm handing back for you for a poll.
Yes, of course. We love to do a good poll, and there was a lot that we covered in that last bit. I guess the main question is, which of these statements best describes your business? So how are you guys feeling about, modern awards and when it comes to dealing with awards? Simon gave a lot in the beginning around how you might be feeling if you're trying to navigate them and potentially not knowing that some of them might apply to your business. It's definitely something that employers do trip up on. That's why we see case after case, unfortunately. So how is everyone feeling? Do people feel like modern awards apply to them? Do they feel like it doesn't? Do you feel really confident in that? Have you gone out and sought advice? Let us know, and we'll keep things going, but we will definitely see the number pop up, Simon. So I will probably jump back in somewhere in between and let you know kind of what the whole statistic is behind that. Now we'll keep things moving and go to the next section, which is all about looking at the rest of the changes for the year, because employment law doesn't seem to sleep. It seems to keep moving. And Simon, what are we looking at now for the second half of this year? Is it really bad? Is it okay?
I don't think it's too bad. I don't think it's too bad. I think last year was a lot worse.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's look at what's coming for the rest of the year. So there are going to be pay increases in the care and community sector. The Fair Work Commission have recently been reviewing 5 awards in that sector. So the Pharmacy Industry Award, SHADS, Health Professionals, Aboriginal Health Award, and the Children's Services Award. And they have determined that minimum pay rates in those awards are too low due to gender undervaluation. And gender undervaluation is the idea that in this sector, which traditionally there is a lot more female workers than male workers, and because of historic biases about the work of women being less valuable than the work of men, that has meant that the wages in that sector have been set too low. So they are now looking at increasing the minimum wages in that sector. And when they do that, it will obviously apply to both men and women covered by that award. The increase will apply to everyone. So they are looking at those 5 awards. They have made a final decision on the pharmacy award, and that will operate so that certain roles within the pharmacy industry award will increase on the 30th of June this year, and then again in 26 and 2027. The other 4 awards, they haven't made final determinations in respect of those yet, but we should have a decision on them very shortly. So watch this space. Again, we have a detailed blog on those changes, which we will share in the post-webinar communications. So that's the 30th of June. That will come into effect for the Pharmacy Industry Award. But then the next day, of course, will be the 1st of July minimum wage increases, which will apply on top of those increases to the Pharmacy Industry Award, by the way, but will also apply across the board to all modern awards and to the minimum wage for award-free employees. So that usually gets announced in early June, and we will, of course, let you know what that looks like as soon as it is announced. So two things which always come up when we look at the minimum wage increase each year is how does it work if the 1st of July falls partway through your pay period? Do you have to pay two rates of pay for the end of June and the beginning of July? How does that work? Well, the legislation actually says that the pay increases come into effect on the first full pay period on or after 1st of July. So if the 1st of July falls partway through your pay period, you just keep paying the old rates for the complete pay period. It's when you get to your new pay period, your first full new pay period on or after 1st of July, when the increases kick in. The second thing that always comes up is questions about, well, I already pay over the minimum wage. Do I have to increase my wages when the minimum wage goes up? And the answer to that is no. If your pay rate is still higher than the new minimum wage, you don't need to increase your pay. Of course, if the new minimum wage has overtaken what you were paying, you need to bump it up. The exception to that would be if you said in your enterprise agreement or employment contract, we promise to always pay employees 50 cents above the minimum wage or something like that, then you would obviously have to comply with those obligations. That's not unheard of, but it's going to be quite rare. There are going to be some other increases that come into effect on the 1st of July. The high income threshold is currently set at $175,000. And if an employee earns over that, that has an impact on various things in employment law. Those employees generally can't claim unfair dismissal. They can be given a guarantee of annual earnings, which means that an award will not apply to them that otherwise would, and they're not subject to the rules about there being limits on the number of fixed-term contracts that can be entered into, and various other things on the screen. So the high income threshold is going to go up, and of course, hopefully most people will be aware the rate of superannuation will increase from 11.5% to 12%. What else is changing on the 1st of July? Well, there are some changes to parental leave. So hopefully you're across how parental leave currently works. And since 2023, we've had an ability for employees to take a part of their parental leave flexibly. So how that generally works is, you have how things used to work is you had to take parental leave in one big chunk, and once you returned to work, your parental leave was over. What the right is now is employees can keep a certain chunk of parental leave to be taken flexibly, so they can take odd days here and there as parental leave in between other periods of working, so they can do that before they start their big chunk of continuous parental leave, or afterwards, return back to work, but save a pot of days to take flexibly. The amount of days, the number of days which employers can take as flexible parental leave has been gradually increased over time. It's currently 110 days, but that is going up to 120 days on the 1st of July, and then it will go up to 130 days on the 1st of July 2026. Another thing that is changing is government-funded parental leave pay. So there is no obligation in Australia for employers to provide company-funded parental leave pay when someone takes parental leave, but there is a government benefit, a means-tested benefit, which some employees will be entitled to, where they get a certain amount of weeks' wages paid at the minimum wage. The number of days of parental leave pay available to eligible employees is increasing to 120 days up from 110 days on the 1st of July. Another change is that if an employee is entitled to parental leave pay, currently no super is paid on top of that, but from 1st of July, the ATO will pay superannuation contributions to employees eligible to government-funded parental leave pay. So it's not a liability on the employer, it will come from the ATO. So I think things to think about with these changes is a lot of employers like to include details of government-funded parental leave pay in their leave policies. It's a great thing to signpost to employees what their rights are there. So if you do that, you're going to need to update your leave policies to take account of these changes. Of course, if you're using Employment Heroes templates, we will make sure that they are updated to take account of the changes. So that's parental leave. Another big change which is on its way is portable long service leave in the community services sector in New South Wales. So usually how long service leave works, of course, is someone gets access to a period of leave after they've been employed by the same employer for a certain number of years, e.g. 10 years in New South Wales. In some states and territories, there is the concept of portable long service leave in sectors where employees tend to move from employer to employer within the same sector, and so never get to a long enough length of service to get long service leave. So that already exists in certain states and territories for building and construction, for example. That is being introduced in New South Wales for community services, so employees covered by the SHADS Award and other relevant awards. It will operate so that employers pay a levy into a central fund based on the number of hours that employees work in community services. And then when an employee reaches 7 years service, they will get paid out from the fund when they take long service leave, and they'll have an entitlement to 6 weeks long service leave. So it will be paid out of the fund, not by the employer. But the employer will have obviously made contributions based on the employee's hours of work leading up through that time. It works alongside the normal long service leave entitlement, so an employee would have access to both if they happen to stay with the same employer for the requisite amount of time. That obligation commences on the 1st of July 2025. So from that date, employers in community services in New South Wales need to keep track of the hours their employees are working, and then they need to submit a record of those hours and make a retrospective levy payment in April 2026, and thereafter it will be done quarterly. They'll need to every quarter submit the hours the employees worked and pay the relevant levy, but they're given a period up till April 2026 to prepare for the new changes. But you need to head over and register and start recording hours from the 1st of July. We are working on a very detailed blog and guidance on these obligations, which is almost ready for publication, but we will share that with you as soon as it is. Right, the right to disconnect. This has already been in effect for non-small businesses since 26th of August 2024, but small businesses were given a bit more of a run-in time to prepare. So this is coming into effect for small businesses on the 26th of August 2025. Now, how does the right to disconnect work? Well, it gives employees a right to ignore attempted contact from their employer or anyone connected with their employment, so colleagues, customers, etc., outside of their working hours. So a right to ignore contact outside of their working hours. But, and there's a big but, they are only allowed to do that where it would be reasonable to ignore that contact. In other words, it is still perfectly possible for employers to contact employees outside of their working hours and to require employees to respond to that contact as long as that contact is reasonable. And I'm sure we can all think of examples in our businesses where it would be reasonable to contact an employee out of hours. It might be to deal with an emergency or with an urgent client issue. It might be where someone's called in sick and you need to reach out to team members to rearrange the roster. You might have employees working in different time zones globally, and it will only be if someone is sometimes contacted out of hours that they will be able to sync with their colleagues. So this is still, I think, workable for businesses, but I think the key point here is demonstrating that the out of hours contact that you require is reasonable is going to be much easier if you've set expectations on employees in advance. So you've told them in advance, this is how our business operates regarding out of hours contacts. This is what's required of you. Ideally, you do that in their employment contract when they sign up, so you can show that they've accepted the role on that basis and have a right to disconnect policy as well. Ideally, you can link their remuneration to out of hours contacts. So say in the contract, your salary has been set at this level in consideration of the fact that a reasonable amount of out of hours contact will be required. So we, of course, at Employment Hero have template contract clauses about that and right to disconnect policy, of course. So reach out if you need any help with that. Okay. So that was, I think, what is to come in 2025. So back to you, Sanam.
We are making record time. This is actually really good. I feel like you've done this before, Simon, We were sitting in the rehearsal session and Simon said, "How many have we done now?" Across the board with Employment Innovations and Employment Hero. It's really awesome to see. And we've got another poll up, as you guys will see. How are you feeling, about these upcoming changes we've spoken about, basically, kicking June off until now. June off until the end of the year. And while we're looking at that and while you're answering those questions, Simon, you'll be happy to hear this. 81% of people said that they felt confident that they've got one or more of the modern awards, down pat, applying to their business. They fully understand it. And only 8% said that no modern awards apply to their business, and 11% said that they're a little bit unsure. And I'm probably in the same boat half the time. So
Well, I think that is great news. I wasn't accepting that. I mean, these all must be Employment Hero customers, and so are completely across all their obligations. But that's great news. That's really good news.
Oh, that's awesome. And I felt the same way too. I was like, you guys are just got you ready to go, finger on the pulse, what's happening and what's happening in your workplaces, which is always awesome to see. So we'll keep things moving. Oh, and before we do, we actually have already got the answers. So how are you feeling about the upcoming changes? We're looking at the second half of 2025. 47% of people said that they feel confident, but 50% said neutral. I'm aware of the changes, but I'm still kind of working through what they really mean. And funnily enough, we did have a few questions come in about potential webinars in the future. So we will be fielding through those and having a look at those too. So thank you. If you have any suggestions, let us know if you're interested in anything. Now, while we're tracking along, we're going to look at 2026 and we're going to see what lies ahead, because when it comes to employment law, like I said, never sleeps. We always keep moving, and it seems like the changes ever since closing loopholes have just been one after the other. So, Simon, what are we looking at for 2026? How is it going to make everyone feel? Is it okay? Have we heard a lot about it? What's going on?
Yeah. So there's a few things that we know that are coming on their way. But yeah, for those of you that are feeling a little bit uncertain about all of this, remember if some of these things we mentioned in the webinar are the first things you've heard about it, we're only really scratching the surface with it, and we're going to share a lot more information about exactly how these things work. So don't feel like, if this is all brand new, that you're expected to be across it immediately, because yeah, we're only like doing the kind of top line. So yeah, look, let's keep going. A change which is coming in 2026 is about gender equality targets. So how the law currently works in this area is businesses with 100 or more employees currently have to send gender pay gap information to the Workplace Gender Equality Agency, WGEA, by the 31st of May each year. So if you are a business with 100 or more employees, hopefully you're doing this already. But if not, then yeah, you need to work out what your obligations are. If you've got less than 100 employees, you don't need to worry about this. Uh, and the information that businesses submit at the moment is information about gender pay gaps. So you have to supply information about, how many men and how many women you have in the workplace, what their wages are, and then the agency publishes information about your gender pay gap. So that has been in place for some time. What is changing is in 2026, on the 31st of May, so in the 2026 return, employers with 500 or more employees will also need to send gender equality target information as part of their annual return. So how that works is the agency has published a list of targets. I think there's 19 of them. And the business has to pick 3 that they're going to implement in their workplace. And they're all targets aimed at gender equality. So they might be a target about reducing your gender pay gap. They might be a target about improving flexible work, or improving your sexual harassment policies, or introducing company-funded parental leave, those kinds of things, increasing the composition of women in leadership positions, that sort of stuff. You need to pick 3 targets and then say what they are in your 2026 return, and they are 3-year targets. So then in the next year's returns on the 31st of May each year, you will report how you're progressing with the targets, and you need to meet your target by 2029, at which point you select a new 3-year, you select 3 new targets for the next 3 years, and the cycle repeats. If you don't meet your targets, or you don't set them without good reason, the agency has an ability to kind of name and shame you on their website. So it is really important to set the targets and to do your best to meet them. Obviously, if there is a reason that you can't meet them for a reasonable reason, you're able to submit that to the agency, and you won't get in trouble. But the main kind of punishment there is, if you don't meet these targets without excuse, you will be kind of listed on the agency website, which won't be a great look. So again, we are putting together some really detailed guidance on this. It's not quite finished, but we will send that out in the comms following the webinar very shortly. Okay, so I think that is all I wanted to say on that. Another thing which is due to occur in 2026 is payday super. So currently, as I'm sure you will know, superannuation is paid quarterly in arrears. And the government for some time has been saying that it wants to introduce payday super. In other words, that superannuation is paid at the same time that an employee's wages are paid. So if your employees are paid weekly, you'll need to make weekly contributions to their super fund. This hasn't been legislated yet, so the exact details of how that is going to work haven't been finalised, but it is very likely that in one form or another that's going to come into effect on the 1st of July. Now, there have been a number of kind of concerns raised with this approach, particularly how it will impact small businesses and how it will really cause challenges and difficulties for their cash flow. So Employment Hero have been making submissions to the government on behalf of businesses and in particular small businesses to make sure that the way that this is implemented is as fair and as reasonable as possible, looking at things like can there be a transitional period where the new rules are introduced gradually? Can there be a proportionate approach to penalties? Is there an ability for there to be a short window of time? You know, if you don't make the super contributions on payday, but you make it within a small window afterwards, should you be able to do that and avoid penalties? That kind of thing, have a transitional period where businesses can get used to the new rules. So we will see how that goes. And of course, once there is news about exactly how this is going to work, we will share that with you. The other point, of course, is you need to make sure whatever payroll system or software you're using is going to be robust enough to work seamlessly with the new changes. And of course, at Employment Hero, we're working tirelessly to make sure that that's going to be the case for us. So that is Payday Super. Watch this space. Okay, and then the last thing that we're going to look at today is a plan to ban non-compete clauses in employment contracts. Now, when we set the date for this webinar, it was pre the federal election, and if there had been a change of government, then it's very likely that there'd be a lot more proposed reform to talk about. As it turned out, of course, that the Labour government was voted in for another term. So obviously the amount of reform on the agenda is a lot less. But one thing that Labour did talk about in the build-up to the election is the plan to ban non-compete clauses in employment contracts. So how does the law currently work in this area? Well, currently it is possible to include post-employment restrictions, often called restraints of trade, in employment contracts. So common ones are non-compete clauses, which basically say to an employee, when you leave our business, you can't join a competitor, or you can't set up your own competing business, and non-solicitation clauses, which basically say, when you leave our business, you can't try and steal our clients. And those are usually limited to a certain period of time, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, and sometimes operate in a particular location. And the key point to realise about these clauses is they're only enforceable if the court thinks they're reasonable. So it's much easier to enforce a restriction against a more senior employee who perhaps has access to loads of confidential information and has contact with clients and customers, versus enforcing a restraint against a junior employee who doesn't have any access to that kind of stuff. If they can't really damage your business by joining a competitor, then it's very unlikely you're going to be able to enforce that restraint of trade. Anyway, so that is how the law works currently. The government have announced that they want to ban non-compete clauses in employment contracts from 2027 for employees who earn under the high income threshold. So higher earners, those who earn currently over 175k, it will still be permissible to have non-compete clauses in their employment contracts. The idea behind this policy, by the way, is the government says restricting employees from moving between employers keeps wage growth down, and it hinders business innovation, so it's bad for the economy. That is the policy reason behind it. So we don't really know much about exactly how this will operate. It hasn't been legislated yet, and of course it still needs to get through Parliament. But one of the things which isn't clear is, will the new law work retrospectively? In other words, will it say from 2027 onwards, you're okay to have a non-compete if it was already in an employment contract? Those obligations will still apply, but you can't put it in any new employment contracts going forward. Or will it operate so as of the date in 2027, any non-compete clause in an employment contract automatically becomes void? We don't know. And the other thing is, it looks at the moment like the government are only pushing for a ban in non-compete clauses, but non-solicitation clauses, the ones about stealing clients, will still be okay. But we will have to watch this space. So I think tips to prepare for this is make sure the clauses in your employment contracts regarding this kind of stuff are really robust. It might be the case that existing contracts with non-compete clauses are okay, so make sure you have got that in your existing contracts if that's going to be important to you. But if you're not going to be able to rely on a non-compete clause, make sure that the other clauses that protect your business, those about non-solicitation, confidential information, intellectual property, make sure those are really robust, because you might need to be relying on those to stop a former employer doing something naughty if they join a competitor. And the other thing, I suppose, is if you can't rely on a non-compete clause to stop a former employee going to a competitor, think about other ways that you can incentivize employees to stay with your business, so they don't want to leave and go somewhere else. Rewards and incentives. Employment Hero has a great number of really kind of great things that you can provide to employees: early access to earned wages, benefits and discounts on goods and services. So we have some great features for our clients, but of course, you can introduce bonuses that reward long service, that sort of thing too. So have a think about the carrot approach as well as the stick. Sanam, I think I'm handing back to you, but why don't can I just give a quick plug for the HR advisory service before
Absolutely.
I do?
I mean, we've heard a few things along the way about the platform, so it'll be interesting to see how we tie this all together. So yes, feel free, HR advisory service.
Yeah, well, just as a bit of a shameless plug, this is the part of the business that I look after. We have a team of HR and employment law experts that are a really great team of people, actually, who provide advice to businesses about their employment law and HR obligations. That is a subscription service. It's part of our employment operating service, but also available kind of as an add-on or by itself. So yeah, you get access to unlimited advice. We'll also do a compliance health check when you come on board, and of course you'll get access to unlimited HR documents, contracts, policies, all that kind of stuff, and representation in claims up to a certain point if a employee brought a claim against you.
This is
Thank
good.
you for letting me say that, Sanam.
No, it's really good. It's a great service. I work here and there with the advisory team. And they don't really need me much because they've basically got it all sorted and they have Simon. So, but I do know that the work that they do is amazing and it can really, really help your business. So absolutely, if you're interested, reach out. I can see questions coming in around it. So we will send out information to you guys and it'll be a great asset and a great thing to have in your toolbox because it is an amazing service. So think about it and see what you guys want to do. And what we'll do is we'll move on to the Q&A part. I've asked Sophia, who is in the back end, if we could get a little bit more time. So we will, wrap things up maybe 5 minutes past, but we will try to get through as many questions as we can. I just want to give a massive shout out to Jessica, who is out in the back, kind of fielding through your questions and has also nicely prepared a bunch of questions that you've sent through that we can have a look at now. So thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you so much, Sophia, for all the work you've done. So we'll kick things off by looking at, there was a lot of questions actually that came in, Simon, around sexual harassment plans and when it comes to obviously Queensland. So one of the first questions was if we have employees that are working remote in Queensland, but our business is actually based out of New South Wales, do we need to have a sexual harassment prevention plan? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's based on the location of the employees and where their employment is based. So the fact that the employer's in New South Wales but has employees in Queensland, yeah, you're still going to need to have it in place for those employees, whether they're working remotely or in a premises.
Oh, and another layer to that as well. So if you've got, with the new kind of Queensland sexual harassment laws that have come in, do the new laws apply when only employees we have our remote workers working from their homes as well? So would it just go across the board both ways?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, the fact that they work from home, yeah, that is still their
Mm,
workplace, and you need a sexual harassment prevention plan um, to cover that.
mm,
100%. And it's sometimes you kind of think of remote working and that your initial impression might be, well, how are they going to be subject to sexual harassment in that kind of setting? But their communications with colleagues and customers when you are working remotely, in a sense, the risks are sometimes heightened because there's going to be less witnesses around, seeing what someone is typing to someone or saying in a Zoom call. You're not going to have people overhearing it whereas you might do in an office. So the risks of there being that kind of covert harassment are really heightened, I would say. So it's really important that you think about ways to tackle those risks for remote workers.
And such a fair point as well, Simon, around kind of taking it outside of the workplace, the remote workplace. So when you're looking at your Slack and your Teams, people are communicating on Messenger, WhatsApp, so many different things when they're colleagues. So there's so much that can go on there, which is a bit outside of what you would normally see in a day-to-day workplace where you're face to face, right? So yeah, it's just thinking about it across the board and seeing what the variables could be there. And one of the questions that we always get time and time again, Simon, is around casual conversion. And specifically, I know you like this one, specifically around what if your casual employee does not want to convert? They are happy being casual. They don't want that permanent full-time status. They just want to truck along.
Yeah, great question, and a really kind of practical one, because I think that the reality is that most casual employees like being casual, chiefly because as a casual employee, of course, you are entitled to a higher minimum wage, which you would lose if you became a permanent employee, unless your employer was particularly generous. But yeah, the way that the new rules work is they are completely based on employee choice. So if the casual employee doesn't want to convert to permanent employment, then they can stay as a casual employee for forevermore. They don't lose that ability to request conversion. So it's not like it's a use it now or lose it. Once they've been employed for 6 months in a non-small business or 12 months in a small business, they can request that conversion at any point. But if they don't do so, then and they want to stay as a casual, then yeah, they can remain as a casual forevermore. I suppose the other kind of side to that coin is, regardless of the casual conversion rights and employees having this right to request conversion to permanent, there's nothing wrong with an employer offering someone a permanent position at any point, which would operate outside of the legislation. But yeah, that is a kind of another avenue that I suppose an employer might take. But yeah, the answer to your question, no, if they want to stay as a casual, yeah, they can stay like that for as long as they want.
Yeah, and what was most interesting as well, Simon, is what you said around the fact that, look, if they don't convert now, that doesn't mean that it kind of is just void and they just stay permanently or a casual for a long time.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that opportunity can always arise later. So and another area was around parental leave, and with flexible parental leave days, we're specifically looking at that. Is there a period of time that this has to be taken within? For example, does it need to be taken within a 12-month period of parental leave commencing? What's the timeframes there?
Yeah, it can be taken at any point up to the second birthday of the child. So that is the limit by which it needs to be taken. So once they've had their child, you can take days up until they've reached 2 years old. There are rules about what an employee has to tell their employer about how much parental leave do I want to take as a continuous chunk, and how much do I want to keep in the bank for flexible parental leave. And there's rules about how much notice the employee has to give their employer about, I want to take a flexible day, in the next week or whatever. There's rules about notice requirements, but subject to that, you can take it at any point up until the child's second birthday.
Oh, wow. Okay, so definitely past that 12-month period. So yeah, that's quite a large time frame. And with portable long service leave, we got quite a lot of questions around it. But the two questions that were quite common was if you could potentially define community services. What does that actually mean? Is it under a particular award, or is there anywhere we can kind of reference to?
Yeah. So there is a very detailed description of what counts as community services and what doesn't. That is on the Long Service Leave New South Wales. I think it's called the Long Service Leave Cooperation New South Wales website. But we will share that details of exactly what is community services and what isn't in the blog. But there's a fairly detailed explanation which we'll take you through. So it should be fairly clear to everyone whether they fall within that definition or not. It's not tied to a specific award, because yeah, it will cover multiple awards, but it won't cover everyone under a particular award. For example, I'm pretty sure the definition says people working in services to elderly people, or people working in aged care facilities, for example, doesn't come under community services work. So that there are things which you might think, oh, well, surely that's a community service, but it isn't. But it's pretty clear from the definition what's in and what's out. But it's a kind of couple of pages long list of what's in and what's out. So we'll share that afterwards.
And one more question, Simon, around casual conversion, actually, because I saw this one come up earlier when you were speaking, and it was quite interesting because I think it is a common misconception. The question is around what happens with casual conversion when you've just got somebody that's a casual employee, they're only working a very small amount of hours. Do we still need to do the whole 6 month time frame for offering them the conversion and all of that? Or can we kind of bypass that since they're only working maybe a couple of hours a week?
Yeah, so how the law works is that um, a casual employee has this right to convert to permanent employment, but only if they no longer meet the definition of casual employee. So there's two criteria. There's one, you need to have been employed 6 months or 12 months. And the second thing is you no longer meet the definition of casual employment. Now, the definition of casual employment looks at a number of factors, but one of those is how many hours they work and whether they're working regular hours. So if you have someone who works very infrequently, only a small number of hours, some weeks they work, some weeks they don't, then they're going to be probably still a true casual employee after 6 months or 12 months. In that case, they won't have a right to convert to permanent employment. So it an employee needs to have lost that quality of casualness, as well as being employed for the period of time to get the conversion rights. That said, you could have someone who is employed to work in your business for 1 hour a week, but they have to be there
Mm.
on Monday mornings, you work 9 till 10 a.m. It's 1 hour a week, but you're required to be there every week. You don't have the flexibility to accept or decline a shift. I would say that doesn't really look like a true casual employee, even though they're only doing a small number of hours. If it's set in stone that you have to be there and you're committed to working that pattern for the foreseeable future. So it's not, the number of hours isn't completely determinative of whether someone is going to have a right to convert or not. But yeah, it certainly is a kind of rule of thumb. If someone is doing only a few hours and it's pretty flexible, they're not going to have that right to convert. I hope that makes sense.
It does. So I think boiling it down, it's kind of looking at that true nature of the relationship, seeing what the pattern really looks like. If they are truly a casual, where you're, maybe needing them this week, might not need them for the next 2 weeks, or you might need them a week after that, you can really see that there's a huge separation there, and it's not becoming 20 hours a week, maybe coming in Monday, Thursday, Friday, and things like that. So it is a fine line, but that's why we have the HR advisory service. So we will wrap things up. Simon, if I could get you to go to the last slide just to say thank you to everyone, and also to reach out if you wanted to chat to Simon or myself. He's probably better and more well versed in the Australian law side of things, but absolutely, please do. And we'll be sending out information. Like I said, thank you so much to everyone for jumping on this webinar and this presentation today. I hope that you found it insightful. It's great seeing everyone's comments around our delivery today. So Simon, we did a great job. So
Good.
another one in the books. A survey will pop up automatically once we end this webinar and presentation. So please fill it in. We love to get your feedback. Even if it's bad, Simon and I will take it on the chin and we'll just tweak it, and then we'll do better next time. So like I said, we'll be sending through all the recordings, the slides, all of the information that you need, as well as different links and guides and fact sheets that Simon mentioned along the way. And we'll keep an eye out for any reoccurring plans or anything like that people have asked for, and then we can send that through as well. So thank you so much, everyone. We started off in the morning. We're in the afternoon now. So thank you. I hope everyone has a great afternoon. And Simon, as always, thank you so much for doing this and being with us today. So yeah, I hope you have a great afternoon too.
Yeah, thanks, Sanam, and thanks everyone.
All right, thanks, guys. Bye.